No matter what you go through, keep dreaming. Keep going, don't quit, keep reaching. You can be the best you wanna be, gotta believe it. Keep the faith, the mustard seed is all needed. You gotta want it as bad as you breathe.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mr. Charleston Gurley. So special shout out to my viewers, special shout out to my listeners for tuning in on today. For anybody that hasn't done so already, please go to the comment section and join the Keep Dreaming community. Again, this is a free community, but today I'm going to be dropping something special after this episode. So I want to make sure that you get it because it's going to be relatable to today's episode. But if we reflect back on last episode, we talked about stewarding the quiet. We talked about tips on learning how to get quiet with God. And if we think about this entire season, we've been talking about stewarding over the process. So just a quick reflection, stewardship means that we manage what is within our control. So if we drew a circle, place you on the inside of that circle, everything that's on the inside of that circle is based on you being able to manage and control. But anything outside of that circle, we leave that up to God. And so for today's episode, we're going to be talking about another layer of stewardship, something that we all manage, but we may not manage it very well. And today's episode is going to focus on money. More importantly, it's going to focus on finances. So if I had to give a title to today's episode, the title for today's episode is Stewarding the Money, Keep the Bag. I'm going to say that one more time. Stewarding the money, keep the bag. Now, for the younger generation, they know what I mean when I say bag. But for my seasoned individuals, when I say bag, reverting back to money, that's all it means. So there's nothing special about that. But we're going to go ahead and jump into our coffee segment on today. So for my choice of drink, I have a almond milk latte. That's what I'm drinking. I wanted to switch it up just a little bit. But we're going to do a cheers on today. And we're going to do a cheers to money, praying for an increase in your life. You see, but the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. So we're not necessarily focusing on the love of it. And we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But I do pray for an increase in your life. So we're going to do a cheers. And we're going to jump back into this episode. So I feel like this episode is going to be super important because a lot of us in our lives, we are either paycheck to paycheck or we're not where we are desiring to be. And really what's happening right now that's going on in society that a lot of people don't realize is there's an equity crisis. Well, what do you mean by that? The wealthy are getting wealthier and the poor are getting poorer. And what we fail to realize is that the middle class is slowly disappearing. And there's a gap and you're either in the wealthy class or you're in the poor class. Now, this is not necessarily due to a lack of opportunities because in the world that we live in on today, we have a ton of technology, we have AI, so we have a lot of help, but there's a lack of information. There's a lack in understanding the resources that we have. There's a lack in financial literacy. And so today's episode is going to focus on teaching you some financial literacy tips because it's not necessarily how much money that you make. I know a lot of times in our lives we say, man, only if I can make a little bit more money. Only if I can make a little bit more money. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's not so much what you make, it's what you keep. And so today we're going to focus on 4 lessons. We're going to talk about managing the bag, managing your money, build the bag, building the money, giving the bag, learning how to give, and then guarding the bag, learning how to guard it. So there are going to be 4 lessons that we're going to cover on today. So the very first lesson that we're going to talk about is managing the bag. And when we talk about managing the bag, we have to understand who owns the bag, who owns the money. I think that's a very important lesson when we're first talking about financial literacy. And so we're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 14. And this is out of the NLT version, and it says, look, the highest heavens and the earth and everything in it all belong to the Lord your God. So when we talk about who owns the bag, who owns the money, the response is God. God owns all of it. But you may say, why is that important as the first lesson for us to understand? Because that allows you to be humble. You see, a lot of times we think that the money is ours. And when we think that the money is ours, now we become greedy. We don't want to give. We want to dictate how it flows. We want to tell the money what it's going to do, when in reality, we're just borrowing it from the creator. We're just managing what he has given us. And so if we understand who this comes from, that allows for us to have a humble spirit, that allows for us not to grip the money. You see, again, the Bible says the love of money. When you don't understand where the money come from and you think that you have produced it, you tend to get greedy. You tend to hold on to it a lot tighter than what you should. And that teaches you a bad lesson just in the beginning, because money comes, money goes. It's not there to stay. So if I understand who supplies the money, where the money comes from, that allows me to be humble. But that also allows me to listen and to obey. I'm gonna say that again. When I understand where the money comes from, that allows me to listen and obey. So when I listen to God, I understand, okay, this is what I need to do in order for this to come in. But then when it comes in, I'm going to obey because I know it's not mine anyway. I'm just borrowing it, I'm just managing it. And then I can be obedient to the instructions on where God instructs me to let this money flow. A lot of times the money comes in and we want to hoard over it. We want to be greedy. We want to be stingy, but it was never meant for us to keep. It was for us to use for the kingdom, for us to use based on how God dictates it. And being able to understand who owns that money in the very beginning, that will help you to set the pace for good financial literacy tips, for good financial literacy steps. So the very first lesson is that we got to learn to manage the money. When we manage the money, we understand that it is not ours. We're simply borrowing it. We're simply stewarding over it, being able to listen and then obey based on whatever God is telling us in that moment. The second lesson that we're going to focus on is building the bag. Now, there are going to be several ways that we build the bag. So there are three ways that you can make money. You're going to have active income, you're going to have passive income, and then you're going to have portfolio income. Stay with me real quick. Active income. This is where I am trading time for money. So what I'm doing, think of it as your typical 9 to 5, where you go to work and you come home. You get paid every 2 weeks. We would consider that active income, where you have to put in actual labor in order to receive a paycheck. The second is going to be passive income. So an example of passive income is, let's say you have a rental property, you fix it up and you put a tenant in it. Every month you collect rent. So now you're collecting money as the months go by without you having to do as much physical work. You see, in your 9 to 5, you have to physically go there. But when you get, let's say, a rental property, you don't necessarily have to physically go there. It makes money for you passively. So there's going to be the second form of income. And then the third is going to be portfolio income. Now, I know a lot of people can relate to this. This means that I purchase stocks, bonds, CDs, things of that nature, where I am buying low and I'm expecting it to increase in value over time. When it increases in value over time, at some point I can sell it and make a profit on what it is that I purchased 5, 10, 15, 30 years ago. So there are going to be three ways that we can build income. Now, we can go a lot more advanced, but I want to just stay basic on today's episode, and then we'll have an episode where we get a little bit more advanced. But when you're asking yourself, how can I make more money? You have to ask yourself, am I aware of the three income phases? So if you have a 9 to 5, most people will say, okay, I just need to go get a second job. But what you're doing again is that you're trading time for money. And it's only so many hours in a day. There's 24 hours in a day, and you can't work consecutively. So maybe taking a step back and say, okay, I check off the box of active income. So now I understand that there are two other forms of income. How can I go about getting passive income? How can I go about getting portfolio income? If I check all three of those boxes off, now I have three forms of income coming into my household. Now, again, when we understand money, it's not necessarily going to happen overnight. So when you buy rental property, it takes time. When you invest into the stock market, it takes time. But the younger that you start, the more accessible that you have when it comes to finances later in life. But learning how to build the bag is very important, because a lot of us have only been taught to simply just go to work, come home, or even get a second job. But when you do that, you're trading time for money. So I want to make you aware of the three forms of income. You have active income, which is an example of going to your 9 to 5 or even your own business. You have passive income, which this gets into rental properties, or maybe you have some vehicles that you are leasing out. And then you have portfolio income. This gets into the stock market, bonds, CDs, things of that nature. So we've already covered lesson 1 where it talks about managing the bag. We've covered lesson 2 where it talks about building the bag. Number 3, we're going to talk about giving the bag. Going back to the very first lesson where we talked about managing the bag, understanding whose bag is it anyway. So when we learn how to build the bag, that's us putting in the time and the effort to increase our finances. Now, when the finances start to come in, that's when we move to lesson 3, where it talks about giving the bag. And there's a scripture that I want to read as it relates to lesson 3. So the scripture that I'm going to be coming from, or scriptures, I should say, is going to be Genesis chapter 14, verses 19 through 20. And it says, Melchizedek blessed Abram with this blessing. Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. Verse 20. And blessed be God Most High, who has defeated your enemies for you. Then Abram gave Melchizedek a tenth of all the goods he had recovered. So this scripture or these verses highlights how Abram viewed God as a top priority. So going back to lesson 1, when we talked about managing the bag and we understand who the bag came from in these pair of verses, Abram understood where the bag even came from, or should he say victory came from. And because of that, he was humble enough to place God as a top priority and was willing to give God a tenth of what he had. So for us, what this means is having a heart full of giving as it relates to tithing. Now, I know tithing can relate to a lot of different things, whether it's 10% in the church, but I want to open your heart and mind to other things as well. Whatever it is that God places on your heart to give, that can be a form of tithing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be 10%, but it's whatever God places on your heart. But it's more so about the principle, it's more so about the mindset. When we deal with finances, it is an internal work. It's an internal work because before it becomes an external work. So what it is that's in your heart, are you willing to give, or are you stingy? Are you saying it's all mine? But if you understand lesson 1, where we're talking about managing God's bag, God's money, then you understand when we get to lesson 3, you should have a heart full of giving. So if God places it on your heart to help this person take a mission trip, there you go with the money that you've received. Or if God places it on your heart to tithe 10%, maybe even 12% in the church, that's on your heart. Now you have a more willingness to give. And now you've understood what it means to place God as a top priority, because he was the one that allowed you to be able to have it in the first place. But you got to work on that internal framework as it relates to being able to give, because if you give, now he can trust you to receive more. But a lot of times maybe you haven't received because you haven't been willing to give. And God is not going to supply a heart that's for the love of it. And so understanding what it means to truly give, that means that you are a servant of the money that you have. Let me say that again. Understanding what it truly means to give means that you are a servant of what you have. The money that you make is not necessarily always for your family. It could be to support another family. It could be to support another individual that God may place in your path, God may place in your life, but you can't hoard over it. You can't be stingy about it because it was never yours in the first place. When he blesses you, oftentimes, as I say on this platform, the blessing is not necessarily for you, but it's for other people as well. It's for other people in the kingdom. So you got to understand what it means to truly give. So we've covered managing the bag, we've covered building the bag, we've covered giving of the bag. Now we're going to move into guarding of the bag. This where it gets into something that I know a lot of us, we say we want to do it, but we don't really do it. And that comes in budgeting and saving. So at the end of this episode, you're going to go back to your email and there's going to be a thing that I have provided for you, and it's called the Money Machine. This is a free template that I'm giving you if you join the Keep Dreaming community. And this is going to help you when it comes to budgeting, saving, understanding your personal financial statement, and all of those things. But when it comes to budgeting, that means that I manage what I have. That means I manage my expenses. More importantly, I manage my spending. Now, one rule of thumb that I always say when it comes to budgeting, we budget every single dollar. So, Mr. Charleston, what do you mean by that? If you bring in $1,000 from your paycheck, we budget every single dollar up to $1,000. The reason why you struggle budgeting is because you have lost track of where certain money has went. You have subscriptions that you have forgotten to cancel, and so that's hitting you every single month, every single week. Apple Music, they're going to get their money. We need to understand where every single dollar is going. So the very first tip that I want to give you, I want you to go back when you get some time. I want you to pull your last 3 bank statements. So this month is the month of July. I want you to go back June, May, April. And I want you to sit down and I want you to look at the paycheck, the amount of money that you brought in, and I want you to map out where every single dollar went. And from there, you start to create your budget. Now, in the template that I'm providing you, you can change the names in that budget to fit whatever categories that you have. But when you fill out every single number, it should come out to the full paycheck that you received, minus maybe a couple dollars or a couple cents. You need to map out where every single dollar went, whether it was groceries, vacation, Netflix, Hulu, eating out, entertainment, date night, all those different things. You need to make sure that you map it out. Now, when you map it out, now you can kind of see where your habits are. Do you tend to eat out more than you cook? Do you tend to go out more on the weekends rather than eating your leftovers? Understanding your habits all comes from being able to budget properly. But before you can budget for next month, you got to go back and understand, what did you do the last 3 months? Now, this template is going to help you do that. Now, when you budget every single dollar, then we go back and we cut out things that are not necessary. You're going to deal with necessity versus wants. First, we have to make sure that we have necessities: food, water, a place to live, making sure you have those things. If all of your money has gone towards those things and you don't have any money for any wants, that's okay. You won't be in this season always. There'll be moments where you're going to elevate, but now we got to manage this season. So if all you can do is supply your needs, that's still a blessing. Remember, we said we don't own this anyway. We're just managing it. But we got to understand that. So when you get that template, make sure that you are filling out your needs as a top priority first. This is where it means to guarding the bag. I'm guarding my necessities first. Then I can add in my wants. But my wants cannot overtake the amount of money that I bring in. I'm going to say that again. The wants cannot overtake the amount of money that I bring in. I got to live either within my means or I got to live beneath my means. A lot of times we find ourselves in financial situations because we are living above our means. We're trying to keep up with the Joneses. When it comes to budgeting, we either live right at our means, but more importantly, I would rather you to live under your means. This is just for a season. So on this template is going to cover budgeting. When we budget, we prioritize the things that are important first. A great depiction that I would like to show of this is, think of a pyramid. And maybe you can reflect back on the food pyramid, but when you think about a pyramid, you have a base. You have a solid base, you have a solid foundation, and then you have categories above that equals up to the pyramid. On the base needs to be your basic necessities, whether that is giving your tithes, whether it's that paying yourself, going into your savings account. And then the next category can be rent, electricity, grocery, things of that nature. Then the next category can maybe be date night, entertainment. Then the next category can be vacation, things of that nature. And maybe you want to invest in somewhere in that pyramid. But when I build my finances, I build it from necessities up. I make sure that I cover the necessities. And if I can't make it all the way up, at least I've been able to cover what it is that I have. So that's going to be the first part. Also, within the financial document that I am providing is going to be a thing called a personal financial statement. Have you ever heard net worth? A lot of millionaires or celebrities, they will have a net worth of $1 million. On here, I have provided a personal financial statement where you will be able to list your assets as well as your liabilities. And your net worth is equal to your assets minus your liabilities. So assets are going to be things such as your house, the value of it, maybe some jewelry, cash on hand. Liabilities are going to be like your car note, your house mortgage, credit card debt, things of that nature. And so you're going to fill it out, and then you're going to subtract the asset total from the liability total, and that's going to tell you your net worth. And so from a financial literacy standpoint, it's very important to understand, what is your net worth. I remember maybe about 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, I did that. My net worth was a negative $500. When we talk about money, you have to be okay being honest. Because when you understand honesty and you allow yourself to be truly honest with yourself, then you can grow. So you got to put everything down on paper, but you got to be willing and able to be honest. And I looked at that. I'm not going to lie. It hurt my heart. It hurt my feelings. But at that point, I knew where I stood. I knew where I was at. And from there, I grew. I grew from a negative 500 to a net worth of 1.5 million. But I had to create the habits, I had to create the standards, but more importantly, I had to be honest with myself and the things that I was doing. I was having Netflix, Hulu, Peacock, YouTube TV. I was having all these subscriptions. I was buying clothes every week. I was trying to take vacations. I was getting in more and more credit card debt. I had bought a new car because I wanted a new car to look like everybody else. And I just had a lot of bad habits. But when I dialed it back and I realized what my starting point really was, and I understood that I was in the negative, then I understood that I had to do the last lesson that we're talking about. I had to learn how to guard the bag. And so the thing that you have to start off with is number one, if you have the template, filling it out, making sure you go back and you look at the last 3 months and you fill out your new budget. And the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to be honest because you have to go find the bad habits. A lot of your financial problems are coming from bad habits. Once you are able to identify the bad habits, then you cut them out. Then you start to replace them with good habits. One good habit that I want to give you, look at your budget every single week. A lot of times we make a budget and we don't look into the end of the month. But by that time, a lot of bad activity has already happened. When you want to lose weight, you go to the gym 2, 3, maybe 4 times a week. It's no different than the money that you're trying to steward, the money that you're trying to manage. Look at your budget frequently. One thing that I do is that I look at my budget every single Saturday so I can see what I did that week and then I can see what do I have left for the rest of the month. So let's just say for example, my grocery bill or my grocery budget is $650. Well, by the first week, if I've already spent 200, now I know that I only have maybe 400 and something dollars left to spend on groceries. Now I'm aware and now I can be a little bit more proactive in my actions. Bad money habits come from bad actions. So if we can correct the actions, then we can create or correct the habits that allows you to save more money. And then from there, then we can get into talks about investing. Then we can get into talks about creating other businesses. But it all comes back to the initial behavior and how you manage money right now. So if we had to go back over the 4 lessons for today, number one, managing the bag. We got to understand who owns it. Number two, building the bag. We understand the 3 forms of income: active income, passive income, portfolio income. And then we talked about giving of the bag, understanding that we place God as a top priority and we listen and be obedient to his instructions for the money that we have. And then the last, learning how to guard the bag, where it deals with budgeting, saving, and things of that nature. And so if you feel like this episode was extremely helpful, I pray that you send this to somebody that could be of use as it relates to financial literacy. As the season goes on, I plan to get a little bit more in depth as it relates to some financial literacy tactics that I've learned over the years. But I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in. Again, in order to get my money machine template, make sure that you join the Keep Dreaming community. I'm going to send it out in an email. And again, it's going to be free. It's going to be comprised of an actual budget, a personal financial statement, and then an allocating pyramid to help you understand how to allocate your finances when you get your paycheck in. This episode, stewarding the money. I want you to make sure that you get into the wealthy and not stay behind. Again, there's an equity gap that's going on, and I don't want you to get left behind. So make sure that you take advantage of the money machine template. I appreciate each and every one of y'all for tuning in. Join me next week. We're going to be tackling another amazing episode. As always, peace, love, keep dreaming. After you accomplish that one dream, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to God, you owe it to your family to be able to do it again, to dream again. But when you dream again, you're not only dreaming for yourself,